Hi, so last week's Wednesday I went to a local thrift store on my way back home from the municipality where I had to take an ID card, and I came across a interesting little device, the one that you see at the top of this stack. That is a Kenwood GE470 graphic equalizer / spectrum analyzer that cost only €7.50. I thought for a time I was in doubt about it, but now I decide why not pick it up? And I did, and I got a free audio cable with it, of course, and thus I could plug it into my system and see how this graphic equalizer would change the way I would listen to music, and also a bit of an anecdote about the history of graphic equalizers in general. Now, I've heard quite a bit about graphic equalizers before even first coming across the GE470s. I saw a video or two by Techmoan about the topic, and that kind of made me curious about them. What does it mean for me to use one? So let's get right into it. So let's have a look at this unit, which only costs €7.50, including a free audio cable, which I don't have on hand. So it's plugged in. I'm just going to turn this on, and the controls over here are for memory and manual, so I can select and setting effects, turn off the effects, and this is like your memory. So I see the button, what these buttons do. So I can set multiple EQ settings over there, and of course when I go to flat, it sets everything back to 0, hit display, and it goes over here. This is the EQ setting, which is a spectrum analyzer, and that is EQ turned on, and it says demo. So this is like a light test, and this is where you can adjust the different bands of equalizer. It shows the effect of that quite well. This is digitally controlled, so there's no like slider controls. This present mode button, I don't think that does anything at the moment. Now on the back we've got the plug, of course, that goes into the socket. We've got line in and out. Note this doesn't have a tape marker like many other graphic equalizers. The idea behind that is that you would put an equalizer in between your amplifier's tape loop output and input and the tape deck. Instead it has this system control, which indicates that this Kenwood equalizer comes from a Kenwood system. Instead of the older ones, like used to be a system upgrade, this is part of a complete system. That's also exemplified by a plug that I can take advantage of, which is this external AC output, into which I can plug other devices so that this doesn't take up an extra plug socket. So now, of course, with all the other parts of the hi-fi, where on earth am I going to put this thing? There's no spare place for it to go, but I am kind of thinking of two places where I could put it. I could put it below my monitor. Nope, I'm not going to get distracted by it during setting because it's going to be blocked up by my laptop in that case. And I can put it in the rack system, the stack that I have on the right side of the desk. So I'm just going to need to decide that right now. So here's where it's going to stand. I've realised maybe having a spectrum analyzer in the centre I'm listening to music is a good idea, just because it looks quite nice to me, to be honest. It didn't really keep in with the kind of silver paint of the monitor, but that doesn't matter. I'll just have to adjust the stand to suit my ergonomics, and of course plugging the cables so I can use the equalizer. And apparently that pass-through was actually needed because the equalizer wouldn't really let audio through. Let me demo that using a Creative Commons music, or maybe one of my own. The EQ is now off. I turn on the amplifier and turn on the music, and nothing happened. So I turn on the EQ, and after a couple of advertisements,
nation was attacked. And your government.
And it works just fine. This is Atlantic by Audionautics. And as you can see, I press the display button I get a spectrum analyzer, press it again and again, and I can change the equalizer settings. Okay, so there's the equalizer. So let's hit flat, which resets everything, go to the lowest, and I can actually... I need to turn on the EQ, and it works exactly how you would expect. There's no like crackling, which is what you get with the slider models. And turn that off. So in general it works quite well to adjust the sound to my liking, but of course we're going to need to talk a little bit more about these things because of a group of people who don't like them. But before I'm going to talk about the purist trolls who sometimes show up on the internet according to some other YouTubers, let's first talk about the way I set this equalizer up. So it connects between my switch box, which is connected to my main computer and my iPad via the audio interface, runs directly to my turntable, my Raspberry Pi internet radio, and an aux input cable. And the tape deck connects to its own aux input, and the headphones connect directly to the switch box or to the tape deck. The equalizer connects in between my power socket, my receiver, and the amplifier when it comes to the power. However, there's something a bit odd. The amplifier doesn't switch off when I switch off the equalizer, but the equalizer will not pass audio through unless you turn it on. That's not that big of a problem though, because hey, even if I'm setting it to its flat setting, I still get a nice spectrum analyzer. Now, I've set up a couple of presets. You can have up to 5 on this particular unit. I know a couple of us will do more or less, but this one does 5, and whichever I use, it changes the sound a little bit, not too much, but in a way that I quite appreciate compared to having a flat curve. The curves that I have set, not only by themselves, kind of improves the sound a little bit, but I can also calibrate the soundscape further from that point using the arrow key. So left and right goes through the frequencies, and up and down changes the levels. Now of course, because this equalizer is meant to go into a system, the way I hooked it up, it doesn't have a tape loop built in. So the way I hooked it up prevents the equalization of tapes being played back, though the tape deck itself has an adjustment for that as well. It prevents the equalization of anything sent to headphones because the unit only sits in between the switch box, which has the headphone jack on it, and the amplifier that powers my speakers. And it prevents equalization of recordings of any of the 4, 5 now other sources that I have onto tape. But that one is a pretty good one, but the other one's kind of a bummer. Maybe I can... Oh yeah, I know what I can do. I can take the 6.3 to 3.5mm adapter I've got over here and just plug it into the headphone jack of the tape deck and plug my aux cable into that, and now selecting the aux input allows me to equalize tape playback more carefully than the trim does, which is kind of a good thing, other than the purists who might argue against the use of graphic equalizer. I've heard from other YouTubers again that they get quite pedantic sometimes, so let me talk about this. Even if you adjust the volume of your equipment, or if you adjust the placement of your speakers or the configuration of your equipment in software or mechanics, you are actually altering the sound. That's one thing. The furnituring and the acoustic treatment of the room, if any, also affects the sound, as does your hearing ability, the way you receive the music, whether that be digitally or on a tape or on a vinyl record. They have imperfections all the time. And of course the way your brain interprets the sound it receives from your ear. So ultimately, whether or not to use a graphic equalizer, and if so how to configure it, is all down to personal preference. And for my preferences, I have quickly listened through a couple of songs of kinds that I would commonly listen to, and I've decided to create a couple of fairly subtle equalizations that are stored in memory. As well as that, there's of course a button for flat equalization as well, which I can use if none of those work. And from that point on, using the arrow keys on the front, which move through the frequencies and adjust the boosting or reduction thereof, I can actually calibrate from flat or any of the other settings to fit exactly the moment and the song. And that's actually a pretty good ability for someone like me who loves experimenting with music. This unit also has things like preference or record settings, which I'm not really intending to use that much, if at all, simply put, because either they sound terrible or they otherwise take the control away from me. So that is my talk about a graphic equalizer I got at the thrift store and the use thereof in general. In other words, I will definitely see you another time. Bye bye! I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you do, please give a thumbs up and share this video with all your friends, and perhaps consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.